Hey, Jason, how you doing, man?
Real good. So, what you been up to these days?
Oh, just working, playing bass like I always do. How about yourself?
Me, working, doing interviews, and playing guitar.
All right, cool. That sounds like a good life.
You've
Hey,
been
Jason.
you've been keeping busy in the world of music
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah, it's been really good. Yep. Spent the better part of last year of 2009 working on the Giant record, and I guess it's come out. I'm not exactly sure when they're released. I think maybe February, March, something like that. And it's doing pretty good. Really proud of it. We worked like dogs on it. We turned in the last mix like December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. We sent off the last mixes. So we were happy with the way it turned out, and have been really happy with the way it's been received so far.
and you guys got a great looking video too to it.
Thanks.
Promised Land.
Thank you very much. I guess you saw the performance video of Promise Land. We've also, on the CD, there's also a making of the record. It shows us in the studio and acting like knuckleheads and all that. Yeah, it was fun, man. It was, like I say, it went on for nearly a year. We started in March of 2009, and like I say, we finished the last mixes. We turned them in December 23rd of '09. So, yeah, it was good. It was fun.
That's awfully close to Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, again, we went right down to the wire with the thing, and turned it in. Like I say, just right into the wire because Frontiers wanted to get it out, at the beginning of the year, and it just took us that long to finish it up. We basically just sort of kept remixing the stuff until we got it to where we really, really liked it, and went back and remastered a couple of things. I mean, you saw the last minute tweaks, that you got to do to make the record really right. So. But I'm pleased with it. I'm happy with it. We were pretty exhausted by the time it was all done. But taking a break and then sitting back and listening to it, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out.
I mean, the sound quality is really fresh.
Thanks.
And
Thanks for saying. Yeah, like I say, we worked pretty hard on it. A lot of this stuff, we would cut it and come back and listen to it and go, nah, that's not it, and throw it away, start all over again. We actually got to a point where we had thought we'd finished the record. We had cut, I think, maybe 14 things at that point, turned it in to the record company, and then sat around and got their input and thought about it and listened to it and thought, we're not quite there yet. So we were lucky enough where they allowed us actually to go back in and cut 5 more things and sort of just reconfigure, the record and come out with the lineup that we've got now. And I think that last batch is really kind of what really brought it all together. And we're lucky Frontiers let us do that, because a lot of record companies would have said, no, that's the deadline, that's the budget, we've got all the songs, let's go with it. And they were really cool about letting us take one more shot and really try to make it great. So, like I say, pretty happy with it.
promo video also you did for it. You guys gonna be making another one for another single?
Well, I don't know. That'll be a little bit up to Frontiers. I guess it's sort of what they pick as a single and what the market wants and all that kind of stuff. If they let us to, yeah, we'd like to do another one. We hooked up with a really good video crew and really like working with them. So yeah, right now it's just sort of in in their hands.
And what do you think of the process of making this new video? Do you find this like still in the old days, like when I'll see you in my dreams video days?
Yeah, well, the whole thing to me, the whole record and the video and everything has a little bit of that old school feel. Where, I mean, you've seen the video, and it's like an old style sort of performance video, like we did back in the day, back in the '90s. And we wanted to do that on purpose, rather than because we're doing that same sort of melodic rock that we did back then, and we sort of wanted to stay true to all that. And so we just sort of took an old school approach, even with the record. We did some things in mixing and in mastering and stuff like that sort of gave it a little bit of that old school flavor back in the '90s, when we were like the first Giant records were back in the day before Pro Tools. We cut them on tape and all that, and there was sort of a lot of tricks and tape manipulation that you learned from back in the day that doesn't really translate to Pro Tools. But we were lucky we had a great mixing engineer, Ben Fowler, who was actually able to convert some of those techniques and stuff that we used to use by manipulating tape. He's actually figured out a way to sort of translate it into Pro Tools and give us that kind of vibe. So a lot of the little tiny production things were kind of an attempt to recreate, a little bit of that old school, back in the day melodic rock feel.
Yeah, a lot of people today try to go back to, to the analog systems.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I'm a studio musician here in Nashville, and record with people all over the states, and there are a handful of studios who do use the old analog stuff. You cut on tape and all that stuff, but it's just a much slower process. I mean, everybody's gotten so used to, the digital way of recording now, and especially the editing process is so much quicker in that, if you use, that sort of system. So it's a little bit that, but there's also, there's certain qualities and, again, like production things that you could do on tape that didn't translate to Pro Tools very well. I mean, just a real simple example would be just the simple thing that everybody knows about, just backwards recording, right? Flipping the tape over and all that. Well, of course, Pro Tools has a plug-in called Reverse, but it doesn't really capture that. It's not the same thing at all. So, like I say, Ben Fowler has spent a lot of time sort of working out, like how could we recreate some of these old things that we used to do and still get that sonic integrity? And I think he did a great job. We spent a lot of time mixing. And some of the little bells and whistles probably only going to be noticed by us, maybe, but we know they're there, so we really tried hard, to get all that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another thing that took us a bit longer. Is like we mixed on these things for a while to get them, the way we wanted them. And like I say, I think we hit the mark.
And Mike, after that, you guys made it mastered somewhere else?
We actually mastered it here in Nashville. There was a guy named Joe Palmacio who mastered it for us, and he's a New York guy who's moved down here a couple of years ago. And when we checked out his credits, he's done AC/DC, and he's worked on all this stuff, and he just understood rock music really, really well. And we didn't want the sort of but let me ask you this, Jason. Where are you calling from? Are you calling from Canada, maybe?
Yeah, Nova Scotia.
Yeah, Nova Scotia. Yeah, okay. So I don't know how it is up there, but you're aware of loudness wars down here, where all the rock bands are trying to get their albums the loudest possible and squashed and compressed and smashed and all that.
True.
And we really didn't want that. We wanted it big and loud and beefy, but not that smash compressed thing. And Joe really understood all that, how to get it loud without just basically squashing the life out of it, compressing the life out of it. So, and we worked with him, and we tweaked on the masters and all that, and it takes a minute, but I think to me there's just no short way to make it really good. There's just no quick way to do it. So we just spent the time and spent the money and did it.
Let's go back in your early albums. Were they compressed? Like you're saying, like what you did now?
Yeah, not the way records are made these days. Not the way rock records are made these days. No, there's this. I mean, are you familiar with the phrase brickwalling?
Oh yeah, I'm really familiar with that.
Yeah. So you're very familiar with that. So you know what the sound of that is. I mean, it sounds like hell.
And when you look at these things on the scales of the wave formats, they're all redlining in a sense, almost.
Yeah, and there's no dynamics. You've got that peak, and it starts, and it sort of never lets up. It never relents. And to me, that was never. It's not very musical, and you lose so much, to me, of the impact when everything is just knocking your head off at all times. So no, back in the day, we did not do that. There were not loudness wars weren't nearly as bad back then, in the 90s as they become over time now, here in 2010. So we made a decision on this record. We knew, obviously, that the overall level has got to be, up to compete with other stuff. You're going to, be before you on the radio and all that kind of stuff. But we didn't want to do it with just compression, with just by squashing the hell out of it. So Joe knew a lot of tips and tricks and when he mastered, and then before he got to mastering, Ben Fowler knew a lot of things where we could sort of get that impact without, like I say, without compressing it to death. And to me, just because we didn't do that, because we didn't brick wall everything at every stage of production, that in itself almost makes it sound a little bit more old school. You know what I mean? It makes it sound, it sets it apart, you know, a little bit from sort of the modern rock. At least it's coming out in the States. So we definitely wanted that. And if we're not every bit as loud as the next guy, well, that's okay. You know, people can just turn it up a little bit.
Now, Mike, why you think that everybody wants that brick wall sound these days and everything compressed? Who started it, and why are the people continuing this trend?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, it's no secret that there was a lot of flack on the internet about the last Metallica record, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of controversy. Bob Ludwig even weighing in, saying, you know, dude, when I got it, everything was brick wall. It's like, what am I going to do at this point? And I'm sure you saw a lot of that stuff. And why they do that, I don't know. I think it's just a competition thing. I think it's like you want your record, you know, if they're playing, you know, a record by Stone Temple Pilots or a record by whoever, you know, Wet or somebody, you want the next record, your record to be maybe at least as loud and hopefully a little bit louder. And I think it gets into that. And then so the Metallica record, it's like, well, how do you get louder than that? I think that might have been a breaking point right there. Because I think wasn't the story, I think their fans actually had the opportunity to hear the version that wasn't brick walls, right? Mm-hmm. And when they could compare the two and realize, wow, this other thing is so much better, I think that has helped maybe kind of dial it back a little bit. But we knew either way, we did not want to go there. We wanted to try to be as musical as possible. And I just don't think you can do that when you just compress everything to death. So, so we didn't do it back in the day, and we, you know, continue not to do it now.
Because, I mean, you look at old classic Led Zeppelin albums, Pink Floyd, stuff like that, you know, they're really soft on the compression.
Yes, and listen, I mean, the other day, I love like old vinyl, like, you know, records. I love to like put on records and play them. And I put on, I think it was Hysteria. And that record is over 60 minutes long. I mean, and so that thing, I mean, it's definitely, you know, not as loud as even records from back in the day, because they'd crammed all that music on, you know, two sides of vinyl. But to me, it doesn't matter, because it sounds phenomenal, especially, you know, I mean, it was sort of one of those records for back in the day. Mm. And that's not particularly, it's just exactly what you're saying. It's not particularly a loud record at all, you know. So you know, to me, it's more musical the other way. I think, you know, you've got to have dynamic. You know, I mean, you're a guitar player. I mean, you get all that.
Oh, for sure. And going back to the Metallica album, when you play that album, let's just say in a flat stereo system with no bass or anything, you can hear it pushing right to the end of it, and you know, all that distortion coming out.
That's it. To me, that's what I mean, I think, you know, musicians, you know, we can spot that a mile away, and I think people listening who maybe are, you know, not into audio and whatever, and why would they care? But they don't necessarily know that it's distortion, but they just know something's not right. It's not pleasing. You know what I mean? And I think intuitively they get something's wrong. They may not be able to put their finger on it, but you and I, it's like, no. Yeah, that distortion is not pleasing after a while. In fact, after a while, it's just damn irritating. So you know, hopefully it'll get dialed back a little bit.
And it could be also with the hip-hop music, too. Nowadays, they're trying to go real loud with the bass boom in there.
Boy, no kidding. Yeah, you can hear the cars rattling when they drive by you.
Well, you know where they mastered their songs. Right to the brick wall.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for you with bass equipment on this Promised Land album, what you go with for this album?
Well, I used, probably a half a dozen different basses. I've got a couple of old Fender basses that I've used. I got an old 64 jazz bass, and I got a 59 precision bass. I used one on there. I used a couple of Sadowski basses. I've got a 4-string Sadowski and a 5-string Sadowski. Used them both. I actually used there's this bass called a Cirrus, Cirrus. I used that on one of the cuts. and I think those are the 5 basses that I used, and then each song would vary sonically, whatever various pedals. Sometimes I'd use maybe like a Voodoo Labs, like a Sparkle Drive pedal. Maybe I'd have that on one channel. A lot of times I'll run 2 channels. I'll run like a direct signal that'll be like I'll have some outboard gear chained together. Like I've got an old API mic pre and an old API EQ, and I like those on bass a lot, so I'll use those. And I've got a tube tech compressor, and I'll use that. And then that'll be like sort of the clean signal, and then I'll split it off and I'll do another signal, typically through an amp, like with some distortion on it. I've got I use Trace Elliott amps, so I use whatever combination. Typically, I don't use my whole live rig because it's a little bit too overwhelming for the studio. So instead of using, all the cabinets and stuff like that, I just maybe bring in one, either 4x10 or one 1x12 cabinet, and use that and the Trace Elliott head, and then pedals to suit, just depending on. Sometimes I'll use I've got an EBS octave pedal. I may have a little bit of that blended in there, along with maybe like some Sparkle Drive, or I've got of course the old Standby Rat pedal. I'll use that in there and just try to basically just sit there and mix those elements together until I think I've got the sound for the track. So it would sort of vary track by track. And I did a lot of things where we'd go in the studio and cut the tracks of the band and all that. And then I'd bring the stuff home and maybe decide that the bass sound wasn't right. So I would tear it down, throw it away, and maybe redo it, at my home studio. Some of those I did, some of those I left, sort of the studio version. But it just to me it was just all about at the end of the day, when you finally get all the guitars and the vocals on there, is the bass still doing what it needs to be doing? So it was always a big experiment right up to the very end.
And you record in the stereo your bass basically with this setup?
It's not like stereo per se. It's really just like two signal. I just split them off, and then I blend them according to what I need. And so there's usually 2 bass tracks. One will be sort of clean, and that'll have a lot of the low end and the meat and all that stuff. And then the other one will typically be maybe not as much bottom end and some sort of crunch, distortion or whatever, but some sort of thing to try to etch it out of the track, and then I'll blend those 2 things together. So yeah, I usually run at least 2 tracks. Sometimes we'll go crazy and go with 3, but typically when we got to mixing, we basically found the 2 that we liked and used those. Well, to me, there's no way that you can get the right sort of distortion sound on bass if you're going to just have one signal and plug your bass into an amp and crank your amp up to 8 or something like that, or especially if you use any kind of pedals. I've got a Buddha pedal too. It's like a tube distortion pedal, and it's real kind of smooth and creamy. And it's like you can't. To me, at least, I haven't found a way where I can get both of what I need. I need to have 2 tracks, because one track, if I'm trying to do it all on one track suffers. One track either doesn't have enough low end, or it's got too much distortion, or it's got too much, you know what I mean? There's always something missing when I do that. So to me, there always has to be that clean, what I call sort of the meat, and then you come over the top with distortion or whatever kind of effects you want to use, and you sort of blend that in there. And you've got to, and the other thing too is that I've learned this through the years of doing studio stuff forever. You have to use a lot of subtractive EQ to get these things to sit right together, because typically you'll have too much low end buildup. You know what I mean? So you got to start notching out stuff and making a space for these 2 things to work together. And it's not really a big science project at all. I mean, your ears tell you immediately what to do, But it just takes a couple of minutes of just sitting there and fiddling with it and getting those notches right. That's what the API is great for, because I can notch in 2 dB increments, with just the little click switches on the API EQ. I've got an old 550A EQ. And so, and it's really easy to just find just the right things to carve out, so the other thing will sort of sit in there and blend together just right.
And in the studio, do you mic your bass amp at all sometimes?
Yeah. That's what I mean when I'm saying we're using the bass amp track. Yeah.
Okay.
And stick a large diaphragm mic on it, and I let Ben Fowler pick whatever he wants, and he'll come in. I mean, he'll use these vintage, U47s and 60. He uses some great mics on there. So we'll definitely stick a mic on a cabinet and then start carving that thing and blending that thing in with it.
A lot of stuff going on for the bass on this album.
You know what? It was so great to be able to say, because David Huff and I produced the record.
Yeah.
And it was so great. That's the one great thing of producing your own record. It's like, if you want to take your part home and redo it, 20 times, you can. I mean, I spent some late nights doing just that. So I love doing that, So, yeah, it was fun.
Well, it's an awesome album, and a real pleasure talking to you, Mike.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Hopefully we get to see another promo video done soon.
I hope so. We'll keep sending those thoughts to Frontiers.
Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very much there.
Cool.
And
Thanks, Jason.
We'll talk again soon.
All the best.
All right. You have a good day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too.